delighted today to be joined by Gabe Andrews. Gabe is currently the VP of data center operations over at Nautilus Data Technologies and has been in the data center space for over 25 years. So welcome, Gabe.
Hey, thanks, Shaun. Happy to be here today, and hello to everyone out there in podcast land. Good to see you, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Perfect. So yeah, I'm just going to kickstart. Obviously, I kind of gave a brief overview of yourself, but what's your tell me a bit about yourself. You know how you got into the data center world and your experience within the data center ecosystem.
Yeah, I feel like my entry into the data center space is pretty much the same story as everyone else who kind of has been a long timer in this market. Is it all happened by accident, right? It's I think the story back in 2000 when I entered in is all by accident, right? I got a phone call from APC and I was like, I don't know who this is, but I don't want to be working where I am and I need to go do something new, so here we go. And it turned into a love affair from there, right? I tell folks my journey in the data center world has been extremely varied. It's been quite nomadic, which is a lot of tied to my spiritual DNA, I guess. But it is turned from a job to a career to an absolute passion. And my kids will tell you I don't geek out about a lot of things, but they hate it when someone starts to talk about data centers or power or AI or anything else, because I can't help myself but butt in and take over the entire dialogue and do what I can to educate and pump and get people excited. So, I started at APC, was there for, let me think, 11, somewhere between 11 and 12 years before, and did a myriad of things there, branched out, started to take over project management, deployment management, design management for enterprise and healthcare data centers. I've moved and done commissioning, I've done design, and been on the forefront of just about every trend that this market has had over the last generation. So it has been an extremely fun job.
Good job you took that phone call, hey, 25 years ago. You're here to tell the tale, so to speak. How have you seen kind of obviously in that period of time you've kind of been done it, got the t-shirt, so to speak. How have you seen it evolve? I know it's evolved dramatically, especially over the past like 4 to 5 years, but how have you seen it evolve?
I think that we've seen a whole bunch of, the data center space is constantly growing. We went through a little bit of a lull, I would say, in about the 2010s, to where the first decade of this century was all about the move to cloud and the, how do you design your data centers to be scalable and adaptable and hot swappable, and all of those terms came up as industries were fully understanding what the power of bandwidth and fiber was going to do for them, and how an enterprise can focus on their core, right? What do I do great? And then let someone else all of a sudden handle what they do great, and that would be IT uptime, right? In that transition. We then hit a little bit of a lull where we tried to figure out what that meant, and everyone was talking about at someday we're going to get to 6 kW a cabinet or 8 kW a cabinet or even 10, right? And hit double digits as a global standard. And all of us on the design side were like, please, let's do this, because I'm tired of only building one data center every 7 years that is built for 22 or 25 kW and never achieves it. And recently, folks were like, hey, we know that we got to 7.2 kW as a global standard, but how about we just make the leap, skip all of the numbers, and we'll just go to 75 kW a cabinet, and we'll just be happy at that, right? And right now, it's been a rush of trying to build this infrastructure rocket ship as the market's already on its way into space, right? And trying to figure everything out. So right now is an extremely exciting time, right? I think the buzz to the fact that data centers are now becoming headline news, even on local stations, Whether folks see that as good or bad, I see it as entertaining. I see it as exciting. I see it as a way that my career choice or my career destiny now becomes forefront and something that gets to talk about and not just be huddled in the corner, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for me personally, you know, I'm involved in the industry in some facets. You know, I think it's good it's involved in news. It's an education piece, right? I think yeah, that's how booms grow and that's how people become interested in it, isn't it? By hearing about it more. So all of a sudden, you know, I've been in recruitment for way over 10 years. Data centers haven't really you know, been a massive thing in the industry. You know, you were talking there, everything was cloud, how are we going to cloud? Nothing was really mentioned about data centers. If anything, it was kind of like cloud, nothing to do with data centers, even though it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
I think everyone thought the cloud, everything was in the cloud, so to speak, in some
It was
aspects.
the
But
it was the worst explained marketing term, right? It's
no,
people are
I
like, I have it
agree.
in the cloud. They're like, I think it might be that one out there in the blue
I
sky,
know.
right? Yeah,
I think that's genuinely what people thought when they thought your data's in the cloud. They thought
yeah,
someone had a server in yeah in the cloud, or it was just
it's not here.
hot
Yeah,
air.
one of
Yeah.
my favorite old comic strips is an old Dilbert cartoon that I used to lead when I was doing presentations and trainings because the president walks in and says, "Where's our data? It's in the cloud. Where's the cloud? I don't know. I lost it." Right? So he's like,
Yeah.
"You lost our right," and you just leave the pun hanging there of you lost my data, you lost my business, you lost the cloud. I don't know. I mean, I think that was what I liked about it was that it was so in your face, but yet so truthful at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously you've seen the kind of the industry evolve and where it is today. We've seen explosive kind of growth over the past 2 to 3 years, and I'm sure it's going to continue to grow over the next 10, 15 years. But particularly like over the next 3 to 5 years, what do you think, I suppose, where do you think the industry's headed over the next 5 years?
So I have a hard time answering that question because if you had asked me 2 years ago where I thought it was going, I would have 100% lost that bet. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know
What
that
would
I
have
can
been
tell
what would
you
have been
what
the bet?
that looks like,
Uh,
but I can tell you that we're not going to slow our growth, right? I see no slowing down of pace, right? If anything, we're going to begin to find more and more places that we can move faster. And by places, I mean geographical regions on the planet Earth, right?
yeah.
Places that are being researched and looked at now by different parties will all of a sudden become new hotspots, and we'll have a multitude of hotspots, not just one going at a single time that everyone rushes to and then everyone leaves to find the next one. And I think we're also going to, at least I hope, eventually see the release of new technologies in the broadband and communication space, right? And in liquid cooling space that enable for all facilities, to begin to be a part of this high density AI race, right? That right now you don't have to either tear down or forget and write off existing spaces, but we'll get to a spot to where some of the challenges that exist today are going to be solved. And now we'll be able to implement this new fast charge and this new high density space to enable everyone, right, to be a part of AI. Because if you're not going to be a part of AI, your business isn't going to exist, right? If you're not attached to it in some way, you're not finding a way to adopt it, implement it, create it, right? Whatever it might be, there just isn't a future for you, and you're going to go be in the encyclopedia right next to an Eastman Kodak.
Yeah. No, it makes sense, and obviously you touched on it there. Obviously, it is difficult to predict because the market is moving so fast. Like 2 years ago, someone would have asked you the same question. You said you would have lost the bet. Where did you maybe foresee the industry being now, and in comparison to where it actually is?
I think that I am seeing more and more adoption of individuals making the leap beyond, right? So I know a whole lot of companies that were extremely happy in their 4 kW a cabinet, right? Pushing the limits at 6. And instead of saying, hey, let's go to 10, they're like, hey, we'll just go to 35. We'll take this entire row, we'll condense it all down, we'll compile it, we'll actually adopt HPC. We'll start to look at how we and accept what it means to begin to rewire and reuse and consume all of that power into a smaller footprint, right? And be able to allow that white space to exist. So I did not think that it would have, folks would be willing to make that significant leap.
Yeah.
I think the only part of that bet, if I had done a parlay that I would have won, would have been the continued dialogue around liquid in the data center and how not everyone, just because they understand the need, right, and the requirement of it, doesn't feel to me that they are ready for it to exist, right? That data centers have existed for 30 years without water in the data center, and we've been very happy, very efficient, very effective, and very financially successful. And so making that switch in the matter of seconds it's going to take a little time. But
Yeah.
everyone knows they have to get there, and it's just that comfortability. And then, as we talked about with data centers, it's also this education of what it means, how to make it safe, how to accommodate, how to exist, and how do you eventually get past your own risk intolerance.
Yeah, makes sense. And I suppose that leads us on to like, what do you feel like is the biggest challenge in the industry right now for a leader that you're facing?
I think that there is not just one, right?
Yeah.
I think part of the joy is like if it was one problem, we'd all have nothing else to talk about, right? Because you put our collective mindset together and we'd come up with something. I think the joy is, or at least part of it is that you're faced with so many, right? So we talked about liquid in the data center, right? It's this changing mindset of how do you achieve these higher densities that we've already, with the capabilities, surpassed what air can do. So how do you make the leap into the future and accept what that requires? Education, right? I think we're still in a spot where there is not an educational path for someone who wants to get into data centers. There are tangential ways, right? You can go to school to be a mechanical engineer, and maybe your job is with a critical engine design engineer firm that has data center work, but you don't follow that path to get here. You don't have data center operations, right? Data center financials and site selection and all of those things to get you into the data center space. You don't have that. And at some point, all of those folks that existed in the space before I did are going to retire to a beach or to a mountainside resort somewhere. And now as you know, right, we're already in this dredge of I can't fill all the headcount that everybody needs. And if we start to retire off knowledge, now that's just a big suck, right? And so now we have education, we have that experience piece of it's really frustrating when I'm sure you see it too, right? Every single job description that comes out tells people I want you for an entry level job with 5 years of data center experience,
Yeah.
right? Those people at 5 years, number one, don't want to take a step back. And number two, those people get held onto, right? We hold on
Yeah.
to our resources once we have them. I think you can then look at the power chase, and there's a number of things within the need for power and where that is, and how do we get out of, or how does government regulations get out of the way to allow data centers to go forward in a very safe, very effective, very community conscientious space? But how do we get away from the power, right? It's water. How do you go about getting liquid into the IT space without consuming all the liquid from the communities? And there's a number of ways to go about it, the number of solutions, right? And then the power and water leads to how do we get out in front of the marketing, right? I think data centers, part of our collective issues are self-made by our desire to not be out front and leading the charge to the broader public of saying the value that data centers give, the value we can drive into a community, the value that data centers give to revitalize towns and cities, and how that, yes, data centers might not be this significant headcount unto ourselves, but the tertiary or the secondary businesses that we require to help keep us afloat, to help support us, that's where all of the significant impact can be. The education and skills gap that instantly goes away, right? We're not out front where we have this, maybe it's a data center that wants to buy up acreage in a town, maybe not. We're super secret until it happens, and it's secrecy that drives the antagonism that you can see sometimes in communities of what the hell's going on in my town, right? And
Yeah.
so we need to get out front and begin to tell a much more positive story, right? So, like I said, I find it fun that there's any number of challenges that we're facing. I don't think any individual one is insurmountable, right? And there's a number of ways that we can put in different parts to accommodate and overcome. But, there's never going to be a pause in a conversation once we get going on where we are with data centers. So
Yeah.
give
Yeah.
me more.
It makes sense. And I think when you talk about like the education kind of piece, I think that's like you said, when it is headlining the news and you're seeing more people talk about, government leaders talk about it constantly, I think then as humans we're naturally quite inquisitive, aren't we? So then we go and do more research and our own create our own subject in terms of what we're looking to achieve. So do you feel like when you talked about specific like college degrees or anything, do you feel like that's something that will happen? Do you feel like it will be like there'll be data center studies that you can study at college?
I think they're real. I know that there are a few, right? They're not easy to find. They're not
Yeah.
outwardly publicized, but I know that there are several here in the United States, and those primarily have been championed by the champions of the data center industry as they get into their twilight and begin to want to leave more than a fingerprint, but leave an indelible impact and a long-lasting legacy. And a part of that is the implementation of some form of data center curriculum, but it's not one that goes across many campuses, right? It's if you went and you looked up data center university degree, right, you're not going to find one that sends you as an option to go to all of these schools and you can get
Yeah.
your secondary and then your bachelor's and your master's and right and follow this path. It's once again, it's I want to be in data centers, let me find the subject I like, and then college can prepare me for generalities. And then you have to figure it out versus let's go and dive into the specificity, to the broad range, the excitement of all the things that data centers are. So yes, I do think it's going to happen, right? Because at some point, universities also are required to have data centers, right? You can't do all of the research activities that they perform. You can't do all of the innovation that they do without the significant power of a data center driving it.
Yeah.
And so it's only going to make sense for a school to create a curriculum in data centers that then they have now their choice of candidate
Staff. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
pull, and now you stay at the school, right? It becomes a self-running engine. Like
Yeah.
if
We
I'm a
already see.
if you're a university president, why aren't you doing that?
Yeah, we already see some schools, colleges, they have physical data centers and stuff. So it makes perfect sense because then you're training the next generation in a labour short market, and then you come here, study, we'll give you a job after it, etc. So and I think at the moment, if there was a study in that space, you'd be if you graduated or something, you'd be inundated with opportunities, providing you knew what you were doing. So. Yeah,
Sure. I
great
mean, just
answer.
think about what it would be to be the first college graduate to actually say, I have a data center operations education, or I know data center engineering, right? I mean, how many job applications are you throwing at that guy? You're like, come on,
Exactly.
just spend Sunday to fill them all out, and by Wednesday, you can take your choice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you're right. I think as the market evolves, obviously society and education will evolve as well.
Yeah, and one last piece on the education. One thing that I try and impress as I go and walk around is that we don't have to wait for school educators to be the ones to create curriculum, right? That we as industry, and I do this myself, and I lobby the principals at my children's schools to allow me a day to go in and simply do a presentation about data centers. I do a very simple one. It's very high level, but it is a way to start and plant a seed with anywhere from 4th to 11th grade of the joy of data centers, right? And there have been kids that I have randomly run into multiple times because it's real easy for me to encourage a teacher to let me present to my own daughter or my son's class,
Yeah.
right? But being able to present that, right, and plant that seed, maybe one of those kids that I talk to becomes the influencer of someone else that charges in either into the data centers or creates it. So
Yeah.
this is my call out to all of the other industry veterans to go do your own local volunteering, right? Walk into a elementary school and say, give me your, can I talk to the 5th grade STEM teacher, right? Because what's more STEM than data centers?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there's a stereotype, isn't there, that I think created over the last maybe 20 years or so, that ultimately getting your hands dirty is maybe not the best career, and it's kind of a secondary career to sitting in an office or something like that. And I think we need to create a different stereotype. There's so much investment in the space, the skills and the labor is needed. I think it's really important from an education piece, like you said. um, everyone should give back to the community that they serve, in my opinion. So if you've been, like you said, I'd love that you do that in schools, and if everybody did that, that'd then create a better education piece for people to say, right, being a plumber or being a HVAC engineer or something is a fantastic career. Whereas I think, like, the stereotype is, well, sometimes a secondary career, and it shouldn't be like that at all.
Completely agree. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if just think of even if 20% of the data center industry veterans decided to do a little give back, right? That is not just a small ripple in a big pond. That is a large boulder that creates an impact that drives an avalanche that makes change. So
Yeah.
that's my call.
Fantastic. From your perspective, I like you're a director, VP level, like, without going into detail, like, what's maybe the toughest call you've had to make at your level in the data center market? I know it's an interesting question.
That's a hell of a question. For me, it is always comes down to people, right? And what it takes to craft, build, and then maintain the type of culture that your business or that you want for your team, for your business, right? And that being able to ensure that you have the right personnel to exist and then continue to grow and expand that culture, right, becomes extremely difficult because at some point there is going to be a very talented individual that you have brought on that becomes a subtraction to that culture, and the decisions are not easy, right? Those become repercussions and things that people see and feel on your team, and being able to explain why a choice was made and how a short-term hiccup or speed bump by the loss becomes a significant value adder as we go forward.
Yeah.
Those are always the most difficult, right? You can get past an angry customer, right? You can get past a critical event that has occurred in critical infrastructure, right? You can get past scheduling delays or impacts that are beyond. You can get past the frustration of permitting offices, right? Or financial shortfalls, or all the other things that come in business that are challenges. Yes, right? But those are things that we can easily get past. I always find that the greatest struggle I have is the time, patience, and then execution of cutting off individuals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's the same in any industry, right? I've managed a number of people over my career, and I think, yeah, we sometimes struggle as human beings to to make that decision. Don't when we know something's quite right, it might be a great perform, but not right for the business. It's hard to make that decision, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've probably all failed and made the wrong decision, etc. So it's using the experience to know that a business survives on its culture and grows on its culture, and if somebody isn't on board or rebels against that kind of culture, you probably need to make a difficult decision ultimately.
Yeah, 100%, right? And it is never easy, right? I don't know, I don't know if I could ever do this enough, right? To all of a sudden make it be the easy thing, right? Because as you mentioned, your fear is always, am I moving too soon? Am I moving too late? Right? And there's a very fine line to where you cross those thresholds, right? And so, yeah, I think for me, it's always the people piece, right? We can get through all of the other problems. So we all have collective histories, but that people piece has repercussions and sometimes in ways that we don't know. But I always feel that in the end, doing what's best for culture is going to be what's best for the majority of all of those, of all the
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, and I think, like nobody gets it right the first time, no one probably gets it right the 10th time, and then you said that's a fine line, but as you're more experienced,
Mhm.
you know when that line kind of is and you're closer to it. Maybe the first time you're like, wow, I was way off that, etc. So I think it's like anything in life, it's experience, isn't it? And knowing when to make them decisions, but like it's never easy.
Yeah, completely agree. Good point.
Fantastic. And you're like, I suppose that we know about the grid demand that's placed on data centers now. How do you think the industry can adapt to that and to the having increasing grid demand that we're placing on building data centers?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things here, right? Let's go with first off, right? I think that there is something that comes with our own personal honesty of what our consumption is going to be in a RAM, right? There is very few instances of data centers day one flipping on that utility switch and consuming multiple megawatts, right? That usually the day you flip that switch, you're pulling, KWs. And then day two, you're pulling you know, and there is a ramp, there is a pace that you go, right? So utilities, I have often found if I walk in with partners and say, this is the site we want, this is the amount of power we want, and by the way, here's the ramp schedule, right? All of a sudden, we are now friends, right? Because I am not just saying I want 100 megawatts day one, right? Knowing that number one, they may not get there, but number two, I'm not pulling that day one, right? And
Yeah.
what's my logical ramp schedule and how do I tie that in? And even if it is a week to week doubling, tripling geometric growth, right? Being able to provide that gives insight to the utility to know that I'm a part of what they need, right? And providing and helping them, right? Because you talk to utilities, their problems generally are be like, look, I would love to give you that, but I am overprescribed by 30% to this other customer who for the last 7 years has always been way under what they're pulling, but we have an agreement signed, right? And so they're like, we would love to go and steal that power and give it to you right now. And how do you, me being upfront and explaining, that's one way, right? Being upfront, honest makes good partnerships. The next one is doing our best to jointly work, like the data center industry, work with the grid industry to go to whoever is the governing official to help them to understand the complexity of what it takes for what we need, the long-term value, and how do we go and do this at a pace, at a scale, and at a race to that makes sense for business, but also does it in an appeasing way, right? And then the greatest solution of all is to government regulation get out of the way to allow these extremely intelligent, extremely safety conscious people to begin to bring to market all of the nuclear power, right? You give nuclear microgrids to data centers, there isn't a utility problem for commercial and residential industries, right? Data centers, we build our own microgrids, we all of a sudden begin to consume that. You now allow data centers to be a central hub of an industrial park, industrial plant, industrial city. whatever the terms are out there that the market keeps talking about, because this idea is not uniquely mine, but you all of a sudden put industry on its own separate microgrid, allow these nuclear power plants to go on. You now get clean energy for the next 1100 years. You get power on a scale and a demand that is available when it's needed, and it's not impacting commercial residential spaces. Right
Yeah.
now, I understand that that's a panacea. I think it's very achievable. The problem is that we are locked into a regulatory environment that is very slow to accept and adopt changes in technology.
Why does it, that's a great point, because obviously regulation affects every industry, doesn't it? But, this industry, why do you feel like regulation is maybe holding it back?
I mean, you can just go look at the stories of the Terra plant out there in Wyoming and what it is, how much their struggles have been with the dumbing down, with the simpling down, with the changing of the narrative and their technical advancements to be able to meet the nuclear inspector's guidebook from, that is many decades old, right? From the 70s and the 80s. And if they're not advancing at a regulatory level to stay pace with the technology advancements, right, we're never going to be able to go forward, right? Nothing stays static in this in business for decades on end, right? It is, if you aren't evolving, if you aren't changing, if you aren't adapting and adopting new things, then your business is dying, right? And so that follows in the nuclear power space. Sadly, the government does not, in my opinion, ever feel the need that it has to adopt or change or advance to continue to exist, because it shall just continue to exist as we are all beholden to it. So
Yeah.
at some point, I know there are folks who are working on trying to make this evolve, right? I don't want to say that all government is bad, because I'll have a bunch of neighbors who are going to come over and rap on my door. But, there are efforts to be done, but I think that we're well past the time, and this should be something that moves forward, because the utility strain, the problems of grid expansion, of grid delivery, right, that can rapidly be drawn down in the industrial space where data centers belong, and allow the grid to where, residential growth is, a lot easier to accommodate and plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. Which, I suppose, from a technology perspective, ultimately this is technology, what do you feel like is going to have the biggest impact on data centers as a whole from a technology perspective?
Good question. I think a lot of it is already here, right, in
Yeah.
the GPU, TPU, LPU releases, and what that's doing from a data storage, data compute, right? That translation of ones and zeros to the power that AI is delivering to all of us. I significantly see some of that. What I am certainly hoping for is somehow in a way to be able to enable the significant loads that are being put into a cabinet, primarily so that you have, right, you keep all of your different GPUs as close together so that you have no latency between them. Someone's going to create some technology that enables for a faster than what fiber light is currently allowing in communication, to be able to extend that, right? So instead of a multitude of 1 megawatt cabinets, and how we're going to actually consume all of that heat energy without creating vapor and a number of piping that wasn't ready for that, to how do you expand that across, right? And give me a greater volume of water to consume it. And, I think that I know there are folks that are working on that. They are way smarter than I, right? And I think that there will also be advances in the liquid that is utilized as the liquid cooling medium, right? And once again, there are extremely intelligent individuals now in this space, fully funded and ready to go allow their minds to do what's needed to be able to come up, right? And I think those two, communication and fluid, is going to be the next advancement, because that will be able to enable all of these new GPU technologies and the constant release, right? It feels like every week there's a brand new thing that is bigger, better, faster, more power, more heat, but allows us to be able to stay ahead of that in the critical infrastructure space.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes what maybe is holding that back, isn't it? In terms of, like you said, like the telecommunication, the cooling side is kind of, it seems like we're a little bit behind with that in the industry, and that's what's, I don't want to say slowing the growth because it's so fast moving, but I think that's what's kind of, yeah, from a compute perspective, that's maybe what's slowing it down.
I don't know that, so it's not slowing down the growth, right? What it does is that
Yeah,
it slows down where we can deploy, right? That it
yeah,
reduces the amount of options you have, right? Because once again, not every building was built for multi K, 100 kW in a cabinet, right? Like at some point that just becomes unachievable based upon whatever the design was for the enterprise or the colo data center at the time. But
yeah.
I think those future technologies are going to be what once again becomes an enabler of the existing real estate to become more and more utilized just in different ways.
Yeah, and I think that's where obviously you're aware, like from a pre-construction, what actually goes into building a hyperscaler or something's extraordinary, isn't it? So I don't think people again have educated on, it's not, you don't just build things, it's all the stuff that you have to think about to build it to make sure that once it's commissioned, that ultimately it's fit for purpose, and it's I think that's the stuff that people don't realize, do they?
No, but I agree, right? I really like it when someone comes up and says, "Hey, do you want to build me a data center?" Thinking like that, the answer is going to be yes, right? It's like
Yeah,
I don't even know where to start with the litany of questions I have,
yeah,
right? Of what that means. And so the way that I usually break it down is then, okay, fine, then go build me a house, right? Because that's something that we all know is unique to what Shaun wants, is unique to what Gabe wants, is right. And all of a sudden they realize, oh, yeah, that's a complex thing. And once again, we're now going back to that just becomes a part of our educational marketing of defining, what are the things in here. And when we start building a data center, right, most of us, when we begin this construction, are doing our best to shake up our magic 8 ball to be able to know what is going to be required in the market once I transition from construct to operations, right,
yeah.
and make that move. So, I got to be a year ahead of my own self. And how do I do that? So, extremely fun challenges for sure.
Yeah, yeah, all part of the game. So,
Yeah.
and what would you say separates some of your experience? You've been in the game 25 years. What would you say separates a good data center leader from a great leader? Um,
Good question. So I think number one is vision, right? And then adherence to your vision. Right now, adherence doesn't mean what you said in January last year is always going to be gospel, right? But that vision statement needs to be something that is broad enough, but yet allows your team to, as you go down your org chart, to be a little bit more laser focused on a component of it. So number one is what's that vision, and can we all align to it and go forward? Is it a guiding light that constantly lights my path as I go forward? Right. The ability for leaders to understand what empowerment truly means, right? If you are empowering your people, what that means to them, right? And how do you guide your direct reports and their directs to act in an empowered environment and what that actually means, right? Empowerment doesn't mean, Shaun, you're empowered to do this task as long as you do the task in these steps the way that I would like it at the pace that I would do it in the time frame that I would do it. Right? That's not empowerment, that's micromanagement or management, and those are two different things.
yeah,
Right? And then the thing that I am working on the most and is the absolute hardest, but I think is what's becoming part of this digital infrastructure that we've built in this AI new place to where education and knowledge and procedural steps can now be obtained by people with the right access to data in an AI, right? An AI tool set can spit that out is the emotional intelligence, right? Of I spent 9 years in the military, so I have a more of a militaristic spiritual nature, right? And
Yeah.
being able to transition away from everyone just understanding that I am speaking tactically and long mission oriented, and they'll figure out the rest and how they have to feel, but now understanding and trying to become a little bit more calm, a little bit more thoughtful in the way things are communicated, right? And so that emotional understanding of emotional to the market, emotional to your business, and where's the culture and understanding. And that's where you can start to understand the small vibrations if you are emotionally tied to the conscious of your business to know when it's about to go off track and slightly guide that back to the vision. So I think those are primary tenants, and you put all of those into any one individual leader, right? That business is guaranteed to flourish, grow, and be of high
Yeah.
demand.
Yeah, and like you said, it's difficult, isn't it? Because everyone always wants the best, and it's it's not a power struggle for some people. It's just they struggle to let go, and that empowerment of giving someone a task and kind of letting them do it themselves and not guiding them through it is sometimes really difficult for individuals, but it's something you've got to do
Yeah,
to give.
100%. It's kind of what I'm getting coached on and what I'm coaching some of my leaders is, if I can do a task or you can do a task and you can do it in 45 minutes, one of your people that you assign it to does it in 2 hours, right? Now, if does your team member ever learn more and will ever get past that 2 hour threshold if you're always running out? So instead, let's adopt the left seat, right seat method, bring them along. Instead of you being done in 45, be done in an hour and a half,
Yeah,
right? Then challenge them, hey, the next time you do this, you should be done in an hour. And then you should be able to shave off little bits until you're just as good, and maybe you get better than I do, right? And allow that to occur and allow empowerment to not be do as I do, but watch me as you learn to grow and take over, and then allow that path to happen, right? And not every task has to be done in the instantaneous nature that the digital world makes us feel it has to be done.
yeah.
Just
I
because
think
crime shows are finished on TV in 30 minutes doesn't mean that's how it works in the real world.
Yeah, I think the as the wider industry, like because there's so much money and the investment is so large, and it's almost like money is no obstacle in this industry. It almost feels like at times that the critical thing is the time element. I think that's what people struggle with because like the age old saying, time is money, right? But I think in this industry, even more so, if something goes off grid for a day, it's costed millions, tens of millions of dollars, etc. So I think that is and it's the same with the labor market, right? Like we need to educate the next generation, but if we need to get past today, so we're not going to worry about 3 years. I think that's where
Yep.
the industry kind of needs to evolve and think how it's going to be sustainable in 3 to 5 years time, in my opinion.
But completely agree, right? It's not everybody wants to pass away while they're walking a job site, right? That might
Yeah.
be my future. That's not everyone, but there are plenty of folks who are going to be who want to have the capability to retire and, like I said, go live on a mountainside resort, spend your days with your toes in the sand, whatever it may be. And so being able to educate, bring along, to give experience, right? I may not have the capability to wait 3 years for someone to gain experience, but you shadow me, right? You listen, you take notes, you begin to act, you follow your first line leader, you follow your second line leader, right? All of a sudden, you are advancing your experience in ways and in a pace that you couldn't do on your own, right?
Yeah.
Just because I put the car in cruise control doesn't mean that I'm gaining mileage and understanding of how to drive.
Yeah, it makes sense. Great analogy. Um, is there any final thoughts from you on obviously like where you see the industry going? I think we've had a brilliant conversation, made some great points, but any final thoughts from your end?
Um, I think my one final thought is that I enjoy my experience to never be smart enough to say no. right? Every challenge put in front of me, like modular data centers going all the way back to 2004, right? There wasn't a marketing term for that. Someone was like, hey, we should design this high density data center and let's use liquid to cool it. And that was back in 2010. And me saying, yeah, that makes perfect sense, right? I don't really understand any of how we get there, but yes, let's do this. Let's figure it out, right? And liquid cooling wasn't a term, right? It wasn't exciting. And boy, do I wish I had trademarked both of those because then I'd be able to have all of the money, right? But
Yeah.
hindsight being what it is, right? But it is let's get past our risk intolerance to get to risk adoption, right? And be able to push and move that forward.
Yeah. So you're thinking sometimes there's a little bit too much, so sometimes like it is a risk, but the benefits outweigh that risk, and we need to just come to that decision quicker. Is that what
Almost,
you mean?
yeah, right. I understand, right? The risk is there, right? You mentioned it. Downtime costs millions, potentially billions based upon scale and what's happening, right? So I understand that, but what's the risk of happening to your business if you constantly avoid this move to AI and liquid cooling, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to plateau and stay? Well, guess what? You're going to get acquired for pennies on the dollar versus, dollars on the dollars type of thing.
Yeah.
Right, if you constantly are looking to do tomorrow that which you've done today, right? Where I don't see that as growth. I see that as just, you're on cruise control, right? Or you've hit pause and you're happy where you are, right? There's a little bit of risk getting out of bed in the morning. So let's just grow that risk and being looking at what can you do in your design? What can you do in your building? What are you willing to accept? Or yesterday, if you weren't willing to accept it, are you willing to today to take a chance? Right. And
Yeah.
that could be liquid in the data center. That could be medium voltage into your building, right? That could be higher density cabinets in your low density design. That could be stealing individuals from jobs and roles that may not look directly attributable to data centers, right?
Yeah.
Go to industries like oil and gas, go to clean room environments, go steal the biotech guys, right? They understand mission critical. They'll understand the generalities. You can teach them data center technical stuff, but let's go expand where we're looking, what we're searching for, and what you're willing to do, right? Make life exciting tomorrow.
Yeah, I think if you don't do it, somebody else will. That's always
But
the
there's the
saying,
other
isn't
thing.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
If I'm not doing it, someone else is, and now I don't have a job, right? Because my boss is going
exactly.
to go find someone else who's willing to do it. So,
Yeah, and I think the final point, on the labour, just the final point where you talked about labour, everybody, I'm in the industry, if they're looking for somebody, 99% of the time they want them to have done, this before and take it to that. That's obviously, with the sheer volume, that's not possible. It's just, yeah, there's just not there's more demand than there is supply. So you touched it there, but from a labour perspective, like you're a big advocate of taking from other industries, and they can learn the data center terminology technical side. That's something you're a big advocate of. I take it.
oh yeah, most definitely, right? I would tell you I hire a lot of folks from other industries, right? And they are now excelling and growing, and folks that are going to have significantly long careers in this data center space, all because my team was willing to take a chance.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think everything's a risk, isn't it? Like you said, everything's a risk and stuff. But somebody that did it somewhere else might not be able to do it in your environment. So it's always
Uh,
hiring's always a risk, isn't it? So
Yeah, for sure.
um,
That's fun. That's what makes it fun. I tell you,
exactly,
super fun.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being a great guest. Like I said, really appreciate your time.
No, this was awesome. Thanks, Shaun. I am happy that we kicked off 2026 together. Thanks.
Fantastic.